steps into it. Pass is caught. Diggs! Sideline! Touchdown! Unbelievable!
Pass is intercepted at the goal line by Malcolm Butler. Unreal. Touchdown! Kansas City! Damian Williams runs to immortality and will be remembered forever in the Chiefs' kingdom.
Yes, hello everybody and welcome in again to another Sunday night here on KC Radio, talking American footy with me, Brent Sternberg. Thank you very much for joining me to talk all things American football in an NFL season that has reached the halfway point. Officially will reach the halfway point halfway through week 9, which started on Friday and will continue tomorrow with a bulk of the games. And there has been a lot happen in the NFL on and off the field. Off the field, in particular, during the week with COVID positive tests and teams having to shut facilities and all sorts of things going on. It's been a hectic week, and it's hit a couple of teams hard. In particular, San Francisco being one of them, the San Francisco 49ers, who played in the Thursday night football game, I should say, on Friday, but they actually had their wide receiver Kendrick Bourne test positive on Wednesday, and that meant that they had to shut down their facilities one day before their game. So that's, talk about ideal. That's not ideal. And then, if you thought that was all, no, that's not all. The following day, his test come back, and it was negative. So he had to sit out the game due to a positive test, and he lives with a couple of, a handful of San Francisco teammates as well, who, by virtue of being close contacts, had to sit out the game as well. So, and that then come back as a negative test. So we had a whole bunch of Niners players that sat out the game that in any other year would have played. So absolutely crazy circumstances there. That Philadelphia, they also announced that on Friday, or Thursday, I should say, Friday our time, that they received confirmation that a player had tested positive as well. And the Houston Texans, they announced that they had to shut down their facilities too after one of their players tested positive as well. A bit of an update on the Kendrick Bourne fiasco, I suppose, if you want to call it that. There have been 104 instances this season where there's been a positive test one day and a negative test the other. And it's been proven positive 101 out of 104 times with further testing. All of this has led to the NFL Competition Committee presenting a resolution to the owners. This is based on a worst-case scenario, a contingency plan, I suppose, of a 16-team playoff season, 8 from each conference, if games are lost due to the pandemic, especially as bye weeks start to disappear for teams. The committee, they got together during the week and they had a chat about this, like I say, worst-case scenario in which they can sort of get the season at least finished in some way, shape or form. So in that scenario, the playoff seeding in either conference, there would be no byes for anybody. One seed, or the first seed, would play the 8th seed, 2 would play 7, 3 would play 6, and 4 would play 5, and so on. Personally, I really hope we don't get to that, because that does sort of feel like a ticky-tack sort of end to the season. But it is 2020, and you know, like I've said in the opening here, it's already been a season that has been mucked around with COVID, and really I'm surprised that there hasn't been more games postponed and moved and cancelled. So they've done really well so far, but I hope we don't have to get to that. I hope this season can sort of play out as per normal. But it's been a very eventful week off the field. Let's go back and have a look quickly. We'll breeze through these games from week 8 last week on the field, which began on Thursday night football 2 weeks ago now, for all intents and purposes. The Atlanta Falcons beat Carolina 25-17. So that's a couple of wins now for the Falcons, 2-6, and the Panthers, they fall to 3-5. The Falcons have now won 6 of the last 7 games against the Carolina Panthers. So that was Thursday night football. The game's on Sunday, the big one there between Pittsburgh and Baltimore. Pittsburgh came out victorious 28-24. Robert Spillane, the linebacker, he set the tone with a pick six in the first quarter, and then it was Minka Fitzpatrick who broke up that final pass into the end zone from the Ravens. Lamar Jackson, he threw a pick six and accounted for 4 turnovers all told in that one, in another lackluster performance. So another disappointing, it's their second loss of the season. The Ravens, a disappointing one to the hated Pittsburgh Steelers. Miami, they had a big win. Who saw this one coming, or a good win, I should say? 28-17. Tua Tagovailoa started for the first time. 12 of 22, 93 yards and a touchdown. Not great numbers, but he didn't need great numbers because the Miami defense, they forced 4 turnovers by Jared Goff in the first half alone. And they scored on defense and special teams. The LA Rams, they outgained Miami 471 to 145 in yards, yet they found themselves getting blown out in the second quarter due to turnovers and special teams issues there. Then the Rams gained 23 more first downs than the Dolphins, 31-8 first downs, and the Dolphins still won by double digits, 28-17. Great win there for the Dolphins. Kansas City, they made light work of the New York Jets, 35-9. Mahomes, pretty casual in a dominant win there for the Chiefs, 416 yards and 5 touchdowns, no turnovers. Sam Darnold and the Jets' woes, they continue. Sam Darnold is sitting on just 3 touchdown passes as we hit the halfway mark. So not a good season for Darnold or the Jets. A big loss there to the Chiefs. Minnesota, they got a good win against Green Bay, really at the hands, or the feet, I should say, of running back Dalvin Cook, who scored 4 touchdowns in that game and was the third Vikings player to do that. He scored touchdowns on each of the Vikings' first 4 possessions at Lambeau Field. An incredible performance. Kirk Cousins was quiet, but again, he didn't need to really do anything because Dalvin Cook was running wild. His longest pass in terms of air yards covered, Kirk Cousins was for 8 air yards. So a good win there, surprising win there for the Vikings. Indianapolis, they beat Detroit 41-21. That's 7 losses in a row now at home for the Detroit Lions. Indianapolis, they welcome back Darius Leonard, who had been out with a groin injury, who had a strip sack on Matt Stafford, which changed the game there. And the Colts, they went from 20-14 down to 35-14 up in less than 4 minutes of game time. So a really violent turnaround in that game. And the Lions have lost Kenny Golladay, who's going to miss some more time due to a hip injury. So that's a bit of a blow. The Raiders in Cleveland won a close one there, 16-6 over Cleveland. That's the fewest points allowed by the Raiders since week 15 of 2012. And they should have had another touchdown there, the Raiders. That was a bogus call that overturned the Henry Ruggs catch in the end zone. Should have been a touchdown on that play. LaMarcus Joyner, he laid a clean and punishing end zone hit on Jarvis Landry to save a touchdown in the final minutes, which ultimately saved that game. And the Browns, they reached the season midpoint, on pace for their first playoff campaign since 2007, but they'll be disappointed with that game. That's one they could have won. Cincinnati, they beat Tennessee in another mild surprise. Cincinnati 31-20 winners. And the Bengals played without 4 of their 5 starting offensive linemen. But despite that, the Titans only managed 2 quarterback hits and no sacks. Joe Burrow, 249 yards and 2 touchdowns in that one. So really good performance again from the Bengals and Joe Burrow. Buffalo beat New England 24-21. New England, they're on a 4-game losing streak now for the first time since 2002. Buffalo beat the Patriots in Orchard Park there in Buffalo for the first time in 9 years. Cam Newton, his red zone fumble in the final minutes was the killer blow there for the Patriots. 11 straight division titles for the Patriots in 19 years. But that's all in the rearview mirror now. They're falling away, New England. Denver, a close win over the Chargers in Denver, 31-30. The Broncos have now won 4 of the last 5 against the Chargers. The Chargers, they had a lead that ballooned out to 3 touchdowns, but within 15 minutes, the Broncos reeled off 21 points and nearly 200 yards of offense in another stunning turnaround. KJ Hamler, the rookie, had the touchdown there at the end. His first ever touchdown, and it was enough to win the game there for the Broncos. Seattle, they beat San Francisco 37-27. Good bounce back game for Russell Wilson and the Seahawks after they lost to Arizona last week. Russell Wilson is now 14-4 against San Francisco all time. DK Metcalf, he had 2 touchdowns and finished with 12 catches for 161 yards on 15 targets, which were all career highs. Jimmy Garoppolo is injured. He's expected to be sidelined for a minimum of 6 weeks and maybe longer. And possibly surgery. I think he's had surgery actually on an ankle. George Kittle as well is out 8 weeks with a broken bone in his foot. His season could be done, George Kittle. So what a great year for San Francisco with injuries and the whole COVID thing, which I mentioned earlier. By golly gosh. New Orleans, they beat Chicago in overtime, 26-23. They needed a Will Lutz field goal to win that one. That's second time in 3 games they've needed Will Lutz to knock one through. Chicago, they rallied back from a double-digit fourth-quarter deficit to almost pinch another one. Another win there, the Bears. Alvin Kamara was great again, 163 scrimmage yards in that win. It's his 3rd game with 150-plus scrimmage yards this season. Drew Brees and the offense... They were okay, but they're going to have a huge test Sunday night against Tampa Bay, which is going to be a beauty, which we're all looking forward to. I'll get to that one later on when I turn my attention to Week 9. Sunday night football last week, Philadelphia and Dallas. Oh my God, this was a difficult one to watch. Philadelphia ended up winning in that one. That was a really ugly game. Philadelphia won 23-9. And yeah, it was tough viewing. Carson Wentz 3 turnovers in an awful performance. And Ben DiNucci started for the Cowboys. I think he was a 7th round pick of the Cowboys in the draft, just gone in April, 21 of 40 for 180 yards, and he lost 2 fumbles, one of which was returned. For a touchdown, it doesn't look like he's going to start tomorrow, Ben DiNucci, but that's fair enough. Disappointing seasons it's turned out for these 2 teams. But anyway, Philadelphia get the win and go to the top of that division. And on Monday Night Football, this was in stark contrast to Sunday night. This was a good game. The Bucks beat the Giants 25-22. And it was an ugly win for the Bucks, but not too bad of a performance for the New York Giants, and they probably win that one if Daniel Jones doesn't throw 2 absolutely back-breaking interceptions, and he also missed some wide-open wide receivers. Antoine Winfield, the rookie safety, batted away a 2-point conversion attempt to tie that one up. An ugly win there for the Bucks on the road. New York Giants 1-7. For the 3rd time in 4 seasons, they've started 1-7. So another poor season for Big Blue in New York. The biggest winner for me this week was Miami. That was a huge win over the LA Rams and how they did it as well. Very impressed. And they are back in this division and back in the playoff hunt in the AFC. Not many people would have predicted that coming into the season. The biggest loser was Baltimore. They had a chance to get a win at home over a bitter rival, and they would have gone to the top of that division as well on the tiebreaker. So a wasted opportunity for Baltimore, and they're now going to be clawing back ground for the rest of the season. So an opportunity missed for the Ravens. The teams on the bye last week, Arizona, Washington, Jacksonville, and Houston, they will all return this week in Week 9, which I'm going to turn my attention to when we return after this short break. On KC Radio 97.7 FM, you're listening to Talkin American Footy with me, Brent Sternberg. Back in a bit. Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Talkin American Footy with me, Brent Sternberg, this Sunday night on KC Radio 97.7 FM. Before the break, we had a little look back at Week 8 in a week that featured some really good games and some big wins for some teams and some upsets as well. And the week that has bridged Week 8 to Week 9 has been a chaotic one with COVID stuff happening everywhere, with players testing positive and facilities being shut down and whatnot. And that affected the very first game of Week 9, which we saw on Friday morning. And it was the Green Bay Packers who were far too good for San Francisco. Aaron Rodgers, or before I get to Aaron Rodgers, sorry, the score in that one, the Packers 34-17 winners over the Niners. So Green Bay go to 6-2 now, and San Francisco fall to 4-5. And Aaron Rodgers was in great form in this one. Another good game for A-Rod. 25 of 31, 305 yards, 4 touchdowns, and his favourite target, Devontae Adams, who when he is fit, when he is fit, he's in full flight, Devontae Adams. He's a great receiver. 10 catches, 173 yards and a touchdown on 12 targets. So a pretty potent night there for the Packers offense, in particular the combination between Rodgers and Devontae Adams. Nick Mullins started for the Niners in place of Jimmy Garoppolo. Nick Mullins, who's played a handful of games for the Niners now, with Garoppolo being injured, 22 of 35, 291 yards, a touchdown and an interception. So, you know, they know that he's not their guy, Nick Mullins, but they just got to try and get through the rest of this season however they can, San Francisco. And how about this? Jimmy Garoppolo and George Kittle placed on injured reserve, and after those two going on to IR, the 49ers now have $80 million worth of cap value on injured reserve at the moment this season. That is incredible. All their good players, they're injured. And when you consider that they had Kendrick Bourne test positive, and then they had to shut down their facility a day before they played, and on a short week as well. At home, I know, but it's always difficult to play, on the short week and to not be able to practice one day before that, not even get into the facilities, and then the game comes around and you have guys that can't play who are healthy to play. You know, they haven't necessarily tested positive. They just can't play because they were near someone who did test positive. What a nightmare week and what a nightmare couple of months for San Francisco. And another stat that sort of paints the picture as to how much pain they were in on Thursday night. Excluding the 1987 strike season, the 49ers become the only team since the 1970 merger to play a game without its leading passer and without 6 of its top 7 leaders in scrimmage yards entering the game. So that's the caliber of players that they lost for that game, San Francisco. So they go to 4-5 with that loss, and the Packers scoot out to 6-2 and atop the NFC North. Turn our attention to tomorrow's games now, shall we? 1 p.m., 5 a.m. Of course, we've got the New York Giants, the 1-7 New York Giants at Washington 2-5. Daniel Jones, from last week, he deserves credit for the Giants' final scoring drive against Tampa Bay, a 70-yard march down the field to put them in position to tie the game, which included a couple of fourth down conversions and a beautiful end zone strike as well to Golden Tate to claw their way back to within 2 points. But he deserves credit for that, but it was his 2 second-half interceptions that really sort of got a Tampa Bay defense back into the game, that they looked like they were just going to sleepwalk their way to another just really poor, dumb loss. And it was Daniel Jones, really, as much as anyone, that got the Bucs back into that game. Washington, they're off the bye after their big win over the Cowboys in, what would that have been, week 6. It's hard to keep up with the weeks ticking by. And Ron Rivera, got to give a shout out to Ron Rivera. He rang the bell a couple of weeks ago to signal the conclusion of his cancer treatment. So well done to you, Riverboat Ron, Coach Rivera. Well done. That's the most important thing that will happen for this team this season, and that should not surprise anyone, because obviously, you know, he survived cancer. You know, there's nothing that Washington can do that can supersede that. They have a strong defense. Washington, ranked 5th in DVOA by Football Outsiders, and they have an improved slightly offense with Kyle Allen and especially Antonio Gibson, who's playing well at running back. So I think they will beat the Giants at home as a result of that defense, coupled with Antonio Gibson. He might run wild on that Giants defense, albeit the Giants defense didn't play too bad, I didn't think, against the Bucs. Chicago at Tennessee coming off a disappointing loss. They go to 5-2. Chicago 5-3. 2 disappointing losses actually in a row now for Tennessee. Their defense unable to get to Joe Burrow, and they were incapable of getting off the field on 3rd and 4th down. The Bengals, like I mentioned, they played without 4 of their 5 starting offensive linemen, and the Titans still couldn't even register a sack. And they did trade on Monday this week for cornerback Desmond King. from the Chargers in exchange for a late round pick, and they've let Vic Beasley go, and they also cut cornerback Jonathan Joseph, so they're starting to make some moves there. The Titans not happy with their defense. The Bears, Javon Wims, you would have seen that. He got into a bit of a fisticuffs with New Orleans defensive back Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. He copped a 2-game suspension for that, Javon Wims, and rightly so. And Mitch Trubisky, without playing a game in the last few weeks, he's gone to injured reserve with a shoulder injury, and he hasn't even played. So Nick Foles will play in this one again. It's in Tennessee. I expect Tennessee to bounce back in this one. Detroit at Minnesota. We've got an NFC North showdown here in this one. Matt Stafford doesn't look like he's going to play. He was another player who was put on the COVID-19 list. Not testing positive, but a close contact. So it'll be interesting to see if he gets up tomorrow. I'm not sure he will. Detroit, they had a chance to put themselves into excellent playoff position entering the second half of the season, but instead they absolutely melted with 2 turnovers that produced 15 points for the Colts last week at the end of the third quarter and start of the fourth quarter. And that obviously led to another loss at home for the Lions, who just cannot win in front of their home fans this season. For the Vikings, Delvin Cook, he accounted for 226 yards of offense and all 4 of the Vikings touchdowns in their upset win over the Packers last week. He put on a clinic, 111 of his 163 rushing yards, come after contact. So that was an all-time performance from Cook. Mike Zimmer's defense, they closed out the game with a crushing hit on Aaron Rodgers on the game's final play that resulted in a fumble recovery. I keep picking Detroit, and I'm losing faith in them every week, so I'm not picking them in this one. I'm going to pick Detroit. I think they will get the win there. Carolina at Kansas City. The Chiefs have placed Chris Jones on the COVID-19 list, so there's some big names going onto that list, and that may not play tomorrow. None bigger for the Chiefs than Chris Jones on defense. Anyway, Mahomes, he completed 5 passes of at least 25 yards to 4 different receivers last week, and 4 of those completions resulted in touchdowns. They're at 7-1 now, the Chiefs, and they're going okay with just that loss to the Raiders as a bit of a blemish. And it's time for Christian McCaffrey. He will return tomorrow. I thought he was going to return last week. He came off IR last week, but he will be back to help an offense that has just started, a team and an offense in Carolina that's just started to stumble the last few weeks, and they're gone to 3-5, but they get their main guy back in Christian McCaffrey. That won't be enough, though. The Chiefs will win this game, I think. Houston at Jacksonville is the next one. AFC South battle, 2 teams, 1-6. For the Texans, this is a lost season now. Their head coach is gone. And this is absolutely a team in no man's land. You know, they have a 1-6 record, like I said, and they likely, with a record like that, you're likely staring down the barrel of a top 10 draft pick, but of course not for Houston. They sent that to the Dolphins last year for Laramie Tunsil, and the real salt in the wounds is that at the moment that stands to be pick 4. And they won't have access to that pick. That's Miami's pick, so that's real salt in the wounds. And this is a team that is not good enough now, and they're not really built for the future with no picks. So this is a team in no man's land, a rudderless team, and they're going nowhere, Houston. And for Jacksonville, Gardner Minshew, he's got a small break and a strained ligament in his right thumb, so he's not going to play. Rookie quarterback Jake Luton, who was a 6th-round pick from the draft just gone in April from Oregon State, is expected to start tomorrow, or will start tomorrow. I think Houston will win this one, despite what I said. I still think they've got a little bit more talent than Jacksonville. I think they will get their 2nd win of the season. This one is in Jacksonville, though, and weird stuff happens in division games. We know that, but surely Houston can get their 2nd win there. But that's a team that is going nowhere and going nowhere fast. This next one should be a good one. Baltimore at Indianapolis, 2 5-2 teams. Marlon Humphrey tested positive. The Baltimore Ravens cornerback to the coronavirus, so there's another player who won't play. And as a result, the Ravens have 7 close contacts that won't play tomorrow, including Matt Judon, the linebacker, Patrick Queen, the rookie linebacker as well, Deshaun Elliott, the safety, LJ Fort, another linebacker, Malik Harrison, another linebacker, cornerback Terrell Bonds, and another linebacker, Ty Bowser. That's just about the whole linebacker group wiped out. They won't be able to play. tomorrow because they were deemed close contacts to Marlon Humphrey. And the bad news just keeps on coming for the Ravens. Left tackle Ronnie Stanley and right guard Tyree Phillips are both on IR. Ronnie Stanley is done for the season, so that's a huge blow for a team that has their sights set on a championship. They blew a 10-point lead at home in a loss to the rival Steelers last week. The Ravens, they remain in good position for a playoff return, but it's not going to be quite as easy as it was last year when they went into the playoffs with the number one seed. They're going to have to go the hard way this year, the Ravens. For the Colts, Rivers delivered another efficient performance, and the Colts pass rush come to life with 5 sacks and 7 hits on Matt Stafford last week. And the win over Detroit, coupled with a second consecutive loss for the Titans, has got Indianapolis back into this division. They're tied in first place with the Titans, who they will play both their games in the next 4 weeks. So two matchups between those two in the coming weeks. We look forward to that. Seattle at Buffalo, a 6-1. Seattle versus 6-2. Buffalo, this should be a good one as well. Wilson is up to 26 touchdown passes this season, one shy of Tom Brady's record from 2007 for the most through 7 games. Josh Allen for the Bills in the passing game has struggled to get going in blustery conditions last week against New England. Devin Singletary and Zach Moss, though, combined for 167 yards on 28 carries with 2 touchdowns to Zach Moss. It's back-to-back season-high rushing performances, actually, for the Bills, who entered the game last week, 29th in rushing. So it'll be interesting to see how they go and if they can get back on track, Buffalo, against an ordinary Seattle defense. And the final game in the early time slot is Denver at Atlanta. For Atlanta, curious coaching decisions, red zone failures, and a missed PAT. Another Todd Gurley mental lapse as well. All contributed to a game that looked like they were going to throw again to Carolina, but they managed to find a way to win that one. So good on them. They accidentally won, almost. Through 3 quarters on Sunday, the Broncos offense had managed just 10 points and 156 yards of total offense against the Chargers. And then Drew Lock went 14 of 18 for 155 yards and 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, punctuated by a 14-play, 81-yard drive in the final minutes to steal one from the Bolts. So got out of jail there. They go to Atlanta at 3-4. Denver to play the Falcons, who are 2-6. I think Atlanta will win this game and get their 3rd win of the season. So that's the early games, folks. When I return, I'll have a look at the mid-afternoon games and Sunday and Monday Night Football when we return on Talking American Footy with me, Brent Sternberg. You're listening to KC Radio 97.7 FM. Back in a bit. Welcome back, gang. You're listening to Talking American Footy with me, Brent Sternberg, on KC Radio 97.7 FM on this Sunday night, where we're talking all things American footy, and we're going through the slate of games in Week 9. That's right, we're up to Week 9 already, can you believe? And before the break, we went through and had a look at the slate of games, the early games that will be on from 5 a.m., of which there's a few good ones. And a few really important games as well, but we'll turn our attention now to the mid-afternoon games, which this first one will be on at 8:05. And this is an important game as well in the AFC West between the Las Vegas Raiders, playing away to the LA Chargers. The Raiders 4-3, the Chargers 2-5 entering this one. The Raiders during the week, the NFL fined them $500,000 and John Gruden $150,000, and they also took away a 6th-round pick in the draft coming up in April for repeated COVID-19 protocol violations. So the league has been, and rightly so, very strong on teams following these protocols and being really strict and you know, some teams have been a little bit lax, including the Raiders, and I feel like the Raiders have been made an example of a little bit here. Although having said that, they had a visitor from outside of the bubble, I guess if you want to call it that, visit the rooms after the game, and I think they also had people and players and coaches and personnel not wearing masks and all that sort of thing. So that's quite a large amount of money for teams to be fined. You don't normally see teams fined that sort of money, and obviously losing a draft pick as well. That's disappointing from the Raiders' point of view. What wasn't disappointing was their performance last week. They beat the Browns 16-6 in Cleveland. Josh Jacobs, the young running back there, the second-year man out of Alabama, led the way. He rushed for 128 yards on 31 carries, which was the most carries for a Raiders running back since 2007. And there was also a story that came to light prior to the game. Raiders offensive tackle Trent Brown was hospitalised before the game. He received an IV for fluids, a routine IV before the game for fluids, and the administration of that accidentally caused oxygen to enter the bloodstream of Trent Brown. So what the hell is going on with these mishaps with injections and needles and things prior to games with these AFC West teams? You remember the Chargers doctor accidentally punctured the lung of Tyrod Taylor earlier in the season, and now we've got Trent Brown who was taking an IV for fluids and oxygen got into his bloodstream. That can kill people. Oh, you'd expect state of the art sort of doctors around these teams and franchises to not let this sort of thing happen. I can't recall this sort of thing ever happening. In this sort of setting. So luckily for Trent Brown, he's okay. He went to hospital for precautionary measures, and he's okay. I'm not sure if he's going to play tomorrow, but at least he's okay. From the Chargers' point of view, they're 3-14 in games decided by 8 points or fewer since last season. And how about this? The LA Chargers, they're blown leads in the last 4 games for the Bolts. 17 points in a loss. 17 points again in a loss. They blew a 16-point lead but managed to come back and win. That was against the Chargers a couple of weeks ago. And then last week against Denver, a 21-point lead. So they are the Atlanta Falcons of the AFC. If you need two teams to rip the heart out of their fans and show it to them, the LA Chargers and the Atlanta Falcons have got you covered. So Justin Herbert continues to play well, but this team just cannot win close games, and they can't hold leads. So it'll be interesting to see how this one pans out, with the Raiders sort of feeling good about themselves coming off a hard-fought, tough win against the Browns, and the Chargers letting another game slip that went right down to literally that final play. This is in LA at the new stadium there in SoFi Stadium in Hollywood. I'm going to pick the Raiders in this one. I have a little bit more faith in the Raiders of recent times. I've been picking the LA Chargers to win a lot. They're a little bit like Detroit. Actually, they're another team, I guess, that blow a lot of leads. That's the holy trinity of blown leads: Detroit, Atlanta, and the Raiders. And the Chargers. The Raiders is the team that I'm picking to win this one, because if they get out to a lead, then the Chargers, then they won't win, because they don't. 8:25 is the next game, and this is a good matchup in terms of history, but not on paper in terms of how the season has played out. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they go to Dallas to play the 2-6 Dallas Cowboys. The Steelers, of course, the only undefeated team in the league at the moment, 7-0. They're 7-0 for the second time ever, and they have never been 8-0. The Pittsburgh Steelers. I think that will change tomorrow. I think they will beat the Dallas Cowboys, and I don't think this game will be particularly close. They acquired the Pittsburgh Steelers, Avery Williamson, and a 2022 7th-round pick. That's what they got from the New York Jets, the Steelers, and they sent a 2022 5th-round pick back to New York. So how about Avery Williamson? He's laughing. He goes from the only winless team in the NFL to the only undefeated team in the NFL. So that's a bit of a shock to the system for Avery Williamson. The Dallas Cowboys, they will be without quarterback Andy Dalton for a second straight game, but not because of the concussion that he sustained a couple of weeks ago. He's placed on the COVID-19 list as well. He was on Tuesday, which will knock him out of this game. So Ben DiNucci's not going to play. It's looking like Garrett Gilbert might play. It's between him and Cooper Rush to play in this one for the Cowboys. So by golly gosh, how the mighty have fallen. They had Dak Prescott, who was just throwing the ball all over the field and leading the league in in passing yards. He led the league, or was second in the league last year in passing yards, and he looked like he was going to lead the league this year, and then he hurts his ankle and goes down, and now the Cowboys look like they're just going to have to just find a way to get to the end of the season with some sort of semblance of quarterback play. When Andy Dalton does come back, I think they can maybe, perhaps win a game or two, particularly within this division, but they're not going to beat this Pittsburgh Steelers team with their defense not doing much, the Cowboys, and having, a no-name at quarterback, with all due respect. I think this will be a comfortable victory for the Dallas Cowboys. For the Pittsburgh Steelers against the Dallas Cowboys in Dallas. The next game, Miami at Arizona. They're out in the desert, the Dolphins, after a couple of really good wins. They've clawed their way back to 4-3. Miami, Arizona are 5-2. And the Dolphins, 3 straight wins now, actually, of 10 or more points. That's the first time they've done that since 2014. So they're having a good little run here, the Dolphins. And their minus 326 total yards difference in the game last week to the Rams was the third lowest by a winning team since the year 2000. So that was incredible. Minus 326 total yards. That was the difference between yards. And it was the third lowest by a winning team since the year 2000. So well done, Miami. How they won that, I don't know. Setting aside the high yardage total that Rams put up, Golf and the Rams offense, they struggled to handle a Dolphins pass rush that consistently brought pressure. And it's interesting, you don't really think of the Miami defense as having all of these beasts on defense, but they got after the LA Rams and they put Jared Goff off his game. So a really good performance from the Dolphins defense. The Kansas City Chiefs sent Washington, their running back DeAndre Washington, and a conditional 2021 7th round pick to the Dolphins this week in exchange for a conditional 2021 6th rounder. So they add a running back to the group there in DeAndre Washington. And Arizona, of course, are coming off the bye after a pretty good win over Seattle at home within the division a couple of weeks ago. And if you just stop and think about what Arizona have done, they have gone from the worst record in the league to an NFC contender within 2 seasons, and playing in the division that is widely regarded as the toughest in all of the National Football League. That's a really good achievement. They're in the playoff hunt, and they are absolutely a playoff contender, and possibly even a team that could do some damage. The Arizona Cardinals, after only 2 years removed, I should say, from having the number 1 pick. So it's a pretty good turnaround, and I sense that the Dolphins are undergoing a bit of a turnaround of the same sort of ilk. This is actually going to be a really good game, I think, between 2 teams that are on the rise, and I'm actually going to pick Miami to go into the desert and beat Arizona. The Cardinals have been a little bit more sort of hot and cold than Miami, but so I'm thinking that Miami are going to go on the road and get a good win on the road there. Sunday night football, this is going to be a beauty. It's another divisional showdown. It's the NFC South. It's the 5-2 New Orleans Saints who go to Tampa Bay to play the Bucks, who are 6-2. And Breeze's arm strength, which has been the subject of a lot of discussion throughout the first half of this season. It's going to be interesting to see how he goes with a Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense coming at him. They've got a furious pass rush and a really good young secondary as well. So his arm is going to be tested in this one, Drew Brees. The 49ers traded linebacker Quan Alexander to the Saints earlier in the week, so they get an upgrade at linebacker. New Orleans, of course, Quan Alexander playing for New Orleans in his first game against one of his former teams, Tampa Bay. They drafted him, of course, 4 or 5 years ago. So an upgrade there at linebacker for the Saints. Last week, Tampa Bay versus the Giants. They probably lose that game 6 or 7 times out of 10, to be honest. But it's a game that Bruce Arians, he won't be thrilled about. But a win is a win, and you've got to win ugly sometimes in this league. And a huge division showdown on Sunday Night Football. I'm excited for this one. I think this is going to be a fantastic game, and I think the Tampa Bay Bucks will win at home and take a stranglehold in this division. Of course, these two teams met earlier in the season in week 1. That was in New Orleans, and New Orleans had a nice win there. I think the script will be flipped in this one. And then Monday Night Football, the final game of Week 9, New England at the New York Jets. This is the game that's a bit hard to get excited about. It's New England 2-5 against the Jets, who are winless 0-8. The Patriots, they've lost four straight. Like I said, for the first time earlier on, I said that they've lost 4 straight for the first time since 2002. They got roster deficiencies. Oh, how well am I going? Roster deficiencies and injuries and opt-outs as well have made this Patriots team look really mediocre in a way that we have not seen this New England team look for a long time. Bill Belichick's comments during the week were interesting. He said about how they paid $1 million for Cam Newton, so they obviously got no money to throw around. And he mentioned the fact that they've sort of sold out the last few years to play in 4 Super Bowls and win 3 of them and appear in another AFC Championship game as well. So interesting to hear Bill speak like that. I haven't heard him talk like that for a long time or ever, really, to sort of defend himself and say, we sort of sold out to buy success, and now we're sort of, it's the byproduct of that. And he said, it's not an excuse, it's just facts. So I thought that was interesting during the week. And for the Jets, they're free fall towards the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. It's looking like more and more likely like they're going to start over at the quarterback position again. The New York Jets. The teams on the bye this week: Philadelphia, the LA Rams, Cleveland and Cincinnati. So that is Week 9. We'll take our final break, and when we return, we'll have a chat about college football, what's happening there, and I'll answer your questions as well when we return on Talkin' American Footy with me, Brent Sternberg. You're listening to KC Radio 97.7 FM. Back soon. Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Talkin' American Footy with me, Brent Sternberg, on KC Radio 97.7 FM, where we've just gone through and had a look and had a bit of a preview of Week 9 in the NFL coming up tomorrow. It begun on Friday, of course, but most of the games play out tomorrow. The teams that are on the bye this week: Philadelphia, the LA Rams, and the 2 Ohio teams, Cleveland and Cincinnati. Those 2 teams will have a break this week. Rightio, let's turn our attention to college football and just cast our eye over what's happening there. The big news in college football is that we are all back together again. The Pac-12, which was the final of the Power 5 conferences to join in this season, they begun their season earlier today. I'll go through all those results next week, but I'm just going to cast my eye back and have a look at what happened in college football last week with the Big Ten, who have been back in action now for a couple of weeks. So let's go and have a look here. Georgia in the SEC, they had a nice win over Kentucky, 14-3. Coastal Carolina, who are having a good year, they smashed Georgia State 51-0. Coastal Carolina have got some draft eligible players, and they find themselves ranked 15. How about 3/4 of the way through this college football season? So good on you, Coastal Carolina. Michigan State in an upset victory over their bitter rivals, Michigan 27-24. They just seem to be going backwards further and further, Michigan, under Jim Harbaugh rather. They do have some draft eligible players who are exciting. I spoke about a couple of those last week. Their pass rushers in Kwity Paye and Aiden Hutchinson, but a disappointing loss there, a conference loss as well to Michigan State. Iowa State beat Kansas 52-22. The Cincinnati Bearcats, who are having themselves a nice season as well, they beat Memphis 49-10. Cincinnati are ranked inside the top 10. They're ranked number 6. Clemson, who are ranked number 1, beat Boston College 34-28. Indiana, they're ranked as well, 13. They beat Rutgers 37-21. LSU, the reigning champions, who are not ranked, they had a big loss to Auburn, 48-11. So they're not going to go back-to-back, LSU. They're not even going to go close. Notre Dame, they had a big game earlier today against Clemson, but last week they beat Georgia Tech 31-13. Texas beat Oklahoma State 41-34. That one went to overtime. Boise State beat Air Force 49-30. Alabama had another win. They beat Mississippi State, shut them out actually, 41-0. Ohio State and Penn State went at it, and that was Ohio State who come out victorious in that one, 38-25, with Justin Fields, the quarterback there, looking really good once again. SMU beat Navy 51-20. 42-37. Florida beat Missouri 41-17. Texas A&M had a nice win over Arkansas 42-31. Oklahoma smashed Texas Tech 62-28. The Sooners are ranked 19 in the country at the moment. And BYU with Zach Wilson, their quarterback, who's caught the eye of a lot of scouts, they had another win. They're ranked number 9 in the nation at the moment, and they won 41-10 over Western Kentucky. So that's the state of play in college football at the moment. Like I say, everyone will be back in were back in action this week with the Pac-12 joining the fray. It's going to be interesting to see how the rest of the season plays out with conferences seasons finishing at different times and how that impacts the college football playoff and bowl season in general. I'm anxious to see how they do that. Okay, let's get to some of your questions. You guys sent me in some questions this week. If you want to send in some questions, you can find me on Twitter at theboylives _26. At theboylives _26 is me on Twitter. If you want to get on there and shoot me through some questions. And while you're there, check out my mid-season power rankings. I had them go up during the week, so check out them and yell at me and abuse me on Twitter and let me know what I got wrong and how I have absolutely no idea. Anyway, here are your questions. This first one is from Josh, and he asks me, what do I think San Francisco will do with Jimmy Garoppolo at the end of the season? Well, that's a good question. He's had a couple of okay games so far this season, Jimmy Garoppolo. He was injured early on, and now he's injured and might not be back this season. He's on injured reserve, although of course players are allowed to return from injured reserve this season. I think they have to spend 3 weeks on injured reserve and then they can come back. So there is a chance that we may have seen Jimmy Garoppolo play for San Francisco for the last time. Personally, I have been a fan of Jimmy Garoppolo for a long time. He's not a special quarterback, but he is a quarterback that I think you can win with, and I think he's been in the perfect position with San Francisco over the last couple of years, and I think it's a perfect position for those guys they're not special quarterbacks, but they're capable. You know, they're okay quarterbacks, but they're just other guys. He's been in a perfect position where you've got a really good defense in San Francisco, particularly a front four. Not so much this year because of injuries, but certainly last year a good defense, pretty good protection up front, and some nice skill position players that all are sort of conducted by one of the great offensive coordinator minds in the game. That's where these guys who are good quarterbacks but not in the top echelon, that's where they can flourish. They need to be in that perfect sort of situation. Good defense, good offensive line. Good offensive, curators curating plays and whatever. The thing with Jimmy Garoppolo is, and we say it's a game of inches, it's all summed up in that one play at the end of that Super Bowl where he took that final shot for the Niners. I think it was to Emmanuel Sanders, and it would have finished the game if he had have connected on it, and he couldn't. And that is what is the difference between Jimmy Garoppolo and the guys on his level and the guys on the next level that you win Super Bowls with. Jimmy Garoppolo had a great season for San Francisco last year, and there's a couple of games that they would not have won without him, but they went through the playoffs and they didn't really need him. They run the ball, and then in the Super Bowl they got to a game where they got through most of the Super Bowl without really needing him. He made a couple of bad mistakes, but they had that 10-point lead, and they just needed him to make that one play, and he couldn't do it. And that's because he's not that kind of quarterback. And that's why you spend your lifetime trying to get a Patrick Mahomes or a Tom Brady or a Drew Brees or an Aaron Rodgers, because those guys, Patrick Mahomes, Kansas City need him, right, to make a play. 9.9 times out of 10, he makes it. He puts it on the money. He throws a wide receiver open. He hits a guy. When you need that play to be made, they make it. Jimmy Garoppolo's not that guy. And and there's a lot of guys that can't do that. And that's why, it's so hard to find guys that can deliver when they have to, because it's a tough position to do that. What do the Niners do with Garoppolo? I'm not sure. I don't know his contract situation off the top of my head, but I would not be surprised if San Francisco move on from him next season. Whether they sniff around and they maybe, if Aaron Rodgers is pried out of Green Bay, I don't think that will happen. But Sam Darnold will be pried out of the Jets. Maybe they go with Darnold, although that would be risky. Maybe Kirk Cousins becomes available. Dak Prescott, maybe. Who knows what's going to happen there? I don't think they're going to finish with an early enough pick to get one of the top guys in the draft. But the more this season wears on, the more I do think San Francisco are going to have a different quarterback next season. This next question is from Kyle. Who do you think is leading the Offensive Rookie of the Year race between Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert? Wow, what a great race that is. Burrow's been really good this year. He's had a couple of bad games. He's had a couple of games where he's had absolutely no help whatsoever from that offense. They need to continue to surround him with protection, Cincinnati. And then Justin Herbert didn't play in week 1 and then only played in week 2 because the LA Chargers doctor punctured Tyrod Taylor's lung. And of course, has not given that opportunity back to Tyrod Taylor because he's just been so good. If you have a look at just sort of the eye test and how they're both playing, I mean, Justin Herbert is that sort of wow sort of guy. He's making the monster throws. Joe Burrow isn't doing anything wrong, but I'll be very interested to see how the votes come in for the Offensive Rookie of the Year. It's going to be between one of those two guys. I think that the best thing you can say for both teams is that, we're only halfway through their rookie year, but they've both found two guys that can play their position, and the job now is to protect them and to give them a good supporting cast. If I was to put my money on who's going to win, I'd say Justin Herbert. Just because he's putting up Joe Burrow is playing fine. He's throwing touchdowns. He's not throwing too many picks. He's putting up good numbers. But Justin Herbert, I mentioned some of his numbers last week about how he's on track with Dan Marino as the only rookie to, I think have an average passer rating of 85 or more through their first 6 or 7 games or something. So he's had a stunning start to this season. I don't think even the Chargers could have expected him to be this good this early. So Justin Herbert, I'd have my money on, but I'm a big fan of the both of them. And the final question is from Jacob. Final question for this week. Do you think the Steelers really are the current number 1 team in the American Football Conference? Well, obviously their record says that they are, and they've had a pretty tough run recently. With Baltimore last week, obviously in Baltimore, and they were good enough to win that game. They beat Tennessee. That was in Tennessee. And they beat Cleveland, who, at the time were in some pretty good form. So I think that they are. I still think Kansas City are going to have something to say about this season. It'd be silly to say that they're not going to. Baltimore have some things that they need to sort out, and they've lost some players through injury that are going to be a huge loss for them. But right here, right now, I think Pittsburgh deserve to be the number 1 seed in the AFC. And like I alluded to earlier, if you want to go out and go to Twitter and check my mid-seeds and power rankings, I do have the Steelers number 1. So there's a little. Well, it's not really a teaser, is it? I was going to say there's a teaser, but it's not a teaser because I told you. So yeah. I think some of the other teams, Buffalo are a team that I expected to have something to say in the AFC this year. They've fallen away a little bit. Indianapolis are a little bit hot and cold. Baltimore with some injuries, like I said. I think those second level teams in the AFC are not as strong. Your Buffaloes, your Indianapolises. Maybe you'd put teams like maybe Cleveland or. Possibly even, certainly Tennessee, but possibly even the Raiders. Maybe I don't think they're as strong as some of those sort of second level teams in the NFC. And I sort of think of second level teams like the Rams, maybe like Tampa Bay. Although Tampa Bay have cemented themselves in that sort of top echelon. But yeah, I think the AFC is, as it has been for a little while, a little bit more sort of diluted than the NFC. Okie dokie, I'm about to head off, gang. Quickly, tomorrow, the game's on free-to-air. The early one on 7, mate, from 5 a.m. is Baltimore at Indianapolis over on ESPN at the same time. Buffalo and Seattle. At 8:30 on 7, mate, you'll find Miami at Arizona, and the game on ESPN will be the Cowboys and the Steelers. Sunday and Monday Night Football, both on ESPN. The Bucks and the Saints Sunday night. The Jets and the Patriots, two teams that desperately need a win on Monday night. I will be back next Sunday night from 10 p.m. to talk about everything that we've seen, and hopefully the season is still on the rails next Sunday night, 10 p.m. on KC Radio 97.7 FM. I'll see you then for talking more American footy with me, Brent Sternberg. Bye now.